morning to viewers from all over the world, and welcome to this exciting webinar on the subject of startups and innovation and COVID-19 in Africa. My name is Eleni Gabrametin, and I lead Ethiopia's top startup incubator, Blue Moon. So I'm pretty passionate about startups. In early March of this year, as we started to see the rise of COVID cases around the world and expected that it would soon be coming to Ethiopia, I threw out a challenge to Blue Moon's incubated startups. To see this pandemic crisis as an opportunity rather than as a major setback for their work. And in 24 hours, they came back with amazing ideas to make hand sanitizers, to make face masks, to 3D print face shields, to set up online mental health counseling, to support families with at-home schooling, to deliver food and medications to the needy, and on and on. And so was born the #Abarim campaign. The reason why I love working with entrepreneurs is because there's something special about the entrepreneurial mindset. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers. Entrepreneurs are doers. Entrepreneurs see opportunities where others see a crisis. And entrepreneurs move fast, and they are extremely flexible and nimble. And that's exactly why we're here today, because COVID-19 has possibly changed the game forever. And we will always talk about pre and post-COVID as we grapple with what has fast become the new normal in the way we live and in the way we tackle health. And in response to this, just like the brilliant Blue Moon startups, entrepreneurs all over Africa have kicked into action unasked, because you never have to ask entrepreneurs. And they are abounding with ideas and action, such as the local manufacturing of PPE, sanitation, COVID testing, tracking and tracing, data platforms, machine learning and artificial intelligence to diagnose and understand patterns of COVID spread, as well as food tech, logistics, ed tech, health tech, and more. And long before governments and their donor partners saw it, startups got it. We don't need to import hundreds of millions of dollars of face masks, sanitizers, and protective equipment, or test kits, or even ventilators. With the world's youngest population in Africa, and one that is increasingly well educated, we have tremendous talent right here on the continent. And today you're going to get a small flavor of some of Africa's brightest and best. The question of the day is not whether we have innovation, but how we are going to harness it, scale it, encourage it, and in doing so, use this COVID moment to change the course of African economies. We have the special honor of not just having a conversation among startups, but with none other than the United Nations Development Program's Director of the Regional Bureau for Africa, Ms. Ahuna Iziakuna. Let's think of her as Ms. UNDP Africa. And UNDP Africa has been at the forefront of the efforts to secure global supply chains in order to procure necessary medical supplies, PPEs, and more from around the world to address COVID. So we are talking to the right person when we talk about how we can leverage and utilize this amazing African startup energy and innovative talent. Before we get started with our discussion, we are going to view some short videos showcasing some of the innovations springing up on the continent. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Africa currently has over 100,000 cases of COVID-19 with over 3,000 deaths. Even as these numbers continue to rise daily, there's an urgent need for enhanced communication strategies that provide vulnerable populations with actionable information for self-protection. Policy formulation at the global and regional levels are currently hampered not only by lack of data sharing to stakeholders, but also because there is a great difficulty in rapidly detecting new cases. This is because in most countries, there are no mass testing or information sharing in communities, and this leaves citizens confused and prone to conspiracy theories. Health workers find it difficult to know areas at risk, and so it becomes difficult to introduce targeted testing and interventions, whilst governments have to make good use of resources. All these issues make it very difficult to introduce adequate containment measures to combat COVID-19. We present a multifactorial, multi-country solution that incorporates screening at the community level, mass testing, validation, as well as resource transmission on a single platform called the COVID-19 Identification, Testing, Tracking and Dissemination Solution, or COVID-TRAT. Citizens through their mobile phones can access screening questions either via mobile application or a text and voice USSD available in several languages. Once a citizen inputs data, the screening algorithm will then immediately group the citizens as well as their communities into low risk, medium risk, and high risk. High risk communities and citizens are then mass tested using a rapid test kit that we have recently developed. While all of this is occurring, they are tracked using their mobile phone usage, and this is mapped out on a dashboard which is accessible to policymakers as well as stakeholders, such as country COVID-19 management team.
TEF 2019, résident au Togo, cofondateur de CMVA Centre Médical Virtuel d'Afrique, une entreprise spécialisée dans le développement des solutions numériques liées à la santé. Nous avons développé COVID-19 CMVA, une application mobile et web mise sur la place du public, servant ou permettant néanmoins à faire une auto-évaluation au COVID-19, une pandémie qui menace d'ailleurs toute la planète.
I wish riding in a car was such a breeze. It's not easy to plan your trip. In today's age, I should not be queuing for a mat. I should see and book a bus niko nimekaa tu kwa ofisi. Pia fare hikes zitapungua cause hakuna kupanga lines kukinyesha.
We used blackboards and even phone calls to schedule buses on our stage, which was so tedious. A PESI trip planner imechange game. It's user friendly and very easy to use. Napata hata reports. Pop.
Before hii EPS trip planner, tulikuwa tunafanya everything on paper. Tulikuwa tunatumia waybill kurecord trips na do. Sasa naona ile namba ya gari iko kwa line na pia nafanya offload kwa simu tu. Na mdosi anapata ripoti papo hapo.
Well, I hope you enjoyed those videos. And now we're going to start our discussion. And I have the great pleasure of introducing our first panelist, an entrepreneur and startup founder from Nigeria, Temi Giwa Tobuson, who has over 10 years of health management experience with the Department for International Development, the World Health Organization, UNDP, and the Lagos state government. In 2014, the BBC listed Temi as one of the 100 women changing the world. Wow. She was also recognized as an African innovator by Quartz and the World Economic Forum. She's the founder and CEO of LifeBank, Africa's healthcare supply chain engine. The company helps hospitals deliver and discover essential medical suppliers and delivers them in the right condition and on time. LifeBank, her company, won Jack Ma's first ever African Business Hero Award in 2019, and she's been recognized and appreciated as a finalist in the Cartier Women's Initiative, as well as the winner of the African Innovation Challenge. Recently, her work with COVID has been featured on CNN as well as The Guardian. Temi, over to you.
When we got our first case of COVID-19 in Nigeria, we knew we needed to help Nigeria and Africa respond quickly. We knew that we were going to be at the front line, and we knew that the continent needed to flatten the curve as much as possible. The first thing we did was build a national register for ventilators, respirators, and ICU beds. We launched a testing center in two cities in Nigeria. Then we expanded access to medical oxygen, which recently became more important for people with COVID-19. And finally, we're expanding access to testing within people's homes by launching our service called LabBank, which is a contactless pickup and drop-off of COVID-19 kits. With all these innovations and all this important work, we've shown that startups can be at the front line and help countries respond to global pandemic, and that our model at LifeBank is really critical to building resilient health systems across Africa.
Thank you so much, Eleni, for that kind and lovely introduction. Haruna, it's so lovely to see you again. Thank you for being here. LifeBank is a medical distribution company. In the last 5 years since we've been operational, we've done quite a lot. We've moved about 22,000 units of medical supplies, 500 hospitals. We've saved 8,000 lives. We've focused on delivering impact at scale. But I think what COVID-19 has taught us and shown us is that it's so really important to build resilient health systems in developing countries, and that it is important to build that infrastructure, that base that will allow sub-Saharan African countries, countries in the developing world, respond to medical emergencies more efficiently. And LifeBank has been focused on doing that and starting that conversation across Africa. COVID-19 has shown us why businesses like LifeBank are so needed. Those silent infrastructure play that allow public sector to actually do their work and do it well. Startups, we think can be really crucial in responding to medical emergency in a couple of ways. We know that startups can be really quick. That speed is really critical to startups, and we've been able to work in that area. For example, we opened 2 testing centers in under 1 month. And these testing centers these 2 testing centers have been able to conduct over 6,980 COVID-19 tests with just a little bit amount of resources. We've been flexible, and startups can be really flexible in focusing on solving the critical problem. For us, when we looked at COVID-19 response, we knew that access to medical oxygen was so critical. So although we were running an oxygen service, we knew we needed to sort of like expand that oxygen service to COVID-19, specifically for COVID-19 patients. So we were able to be flexible in responding to what was actually needed, what the problems that countries were facing in responding to the medical emergency. Startups can build technology, and we can get to, scale and push code really rapidly. We've done that work by making sure that access to critical equipment for COVID-19 was available. We were able to build QUIP, which is a national register for listing products like ventilators, respirators, ICU beds, particularly when those products are available in the private sector. We can also do this low cost by able to, with our speed and our response, we're able to serve patients. All of our COVID-19 work, the testing center, the access to oxygen, all of this has come in free for the patients who absolutely need it. And that's an important part of what we do. So, what do we need? What we are trying to do at LifeBank is to reach scale. We've expanded to 5 regions in Nigeria. We're just about to launch in Kenya, and we're looking at Ethiopia and bringing values in those particular countries. And then after that, expand to the rest of the world. So when startups are in this stage, responding and getting to scale is really critical. And what we're trying to do is what we need, the resources we need, the capital, access to grant capital, access to the right team. I'm throwing out this open. If you want to work with LifeBank and you're in Ethiopia, please reach out. So access to the right team, access to infrastructure, access to capital are all really critical. And I believe deeply that LifeBank has shown why it's so important with all the innovations, with all the scale that we've been able to deliver within a couple of months, has shown why it's so important to support startups. Particularly startups that are local and focused on developing resources in developing countries.
Excellent. Thank you, Temi. It sounds like you've been very busy for the last few months.
Yes.
Working on the data platform, the national registry of where the supplies are and where they need to go, as well as the COVID testing kits that you deployed pretty quickly and have been able to get out, not only in Nigeria, but also in Kenya. And then you also mentioned oxygen as another sort of lifeline. And yet your own core business is blood. You're delivering blood. So this was a really dramatic pivot for the COVID opportunity and or the COVID situation. And so that's awesome. Thank you for that. And we'll definitely come back to you with some of those points you raised about the need for scale, for finding talent, and really work that into our conversation with UNDP as well. So I'm going to move on to our next panelist, who is a very inspiring young man. Daniel Ndima from South Africa is a scientist who specialized in structural biology. He's a protein engineer by training, trained in things I don't even know how to pronounce: crystallography, bioprocess engineering, and biomanufacturing. Daniel is a fellow and proud beneficiary of the prestigious Alan Gray Orbis Foundation and Mandela Rhodes Scholarship. He's also been selected as one of the brightest young minds and is an alumnus of that organization. And he's the founding CEO of Cape Biotechnologies. Cape Bio, based in Cape Town, South Africa, which is an applied genomics and biotech company. Cape Bio has answered the challenge, the COVID challenge, with a kit that provides results in just 65 minutes compared to other tests, which take roughly 3 hours or more to produce results. His Cape Bio's work has already seen support from international partners, including the Canadian biotech company Plantform Corporation, and his work has been, and Cape Bio's work has been featured in a number of publications all over Africa, and definitely picking up a lot of traction. So we're excited to hear from you. I believe Daniel does not have an intro video, so we're going to go right to hearing from Daniel himself.
Okay. Thank you, Elena, for the opportunity, and thank you to my esteemed colleagues on the panel as well. So I'm from a company called Cape Biotechnologies that is from South Africa. So what we do as a biotech company is to leverage on our indigenous biodiversity hotspots. So we know that Africa is quite diverse in terms of its people, but it's also quite diverse in terms of its biological resources. Apart from your normal minerals that are being mined to drive our economies, we also have quite, richness in terms of biodiversity, which are biological resources that are found in our nature. So what we do basically is to get, genetic information from these biological ecosystems in order to develop what we call in our science community as molecular biology reagents and enzymes. So these are sort of products that are used for other sort of different industrial purposes, but the main one that I want to discuss today is more of your DNA analysis. So we were able to develop a COVID-19 because we had a couple of technologies that we could mesh together and be able to then respond to COVID-19 pandemic. So you know that Africa is sort of relies heavily on Europeans and American imports in order for it to even conduct its tests. But this has been a trend throughout the years. Even our local research relies heavily on the imports. So what we wanted to respond to as a company prior to COVID-19 was to then create our own technologies that can then sort of be used by African researchers. So we have about 10 scientists, 3 PhDs, and the rest are master's graduates. And so far we have a few R&D partners in the US, but we also have a distributor in the US. We've been trading in the US for the last 1.5 years. And we also have a couple of other partners in East Africa, West Africa, and obviously in South Africa as well. We work quite close with South African government, and we have been sort of privileged to be supported by South African government and the local communities as well. So, and we are fortunate that we at the launch of the company we able to mobilize funding through E-Squared Investment, which is an investment entity of the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. So both myself, my business partner, Alan Gray Fellow, so we were able to mobilize funding as a result of that. Apart from that, I mean, as a biotech company growing out of Africa, there are many challenges, obviously, that we are facing. One being, that you compete with these big multinationals who have, sort of big muscles. They can basically bulldoze and take you out of the market very easily. So we've been resilient ever since our launch, and we've been trying to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the competitors, try to offer quite unique products. So, and again, we have one good competitive edge because our products are different from those that exist in the market. And we offer the world the first portfolio of molecular biology enzymes that are developed in Africa, that are coming from African natural resources. And in terms of IP, we then are able to then develop our own IP in Africa and be able to trade throughout the world. Apart from that, we also battle with regards to market share, because these guys are quite established. So obviously the clientele would, they have a very big clientele. So in terms of COVID-19, we are about to launch a product that we developed locally within this month. It's a COVID-19 testing kit, as you've mentioned, Elena, and we'll be making necessary announcements very soon. Thank you.
Exciting. I have heard, Daniel, that your enzyme or that your reagent for the test kit is made from a local natural product. Is that correct? And if so, can you tell us what that product is?
So apart from the IP issues that, I wouldn't necessarily share about what we, some of the stuff that are actually sort of undercover. But what we do is that we use local flora to develop these enzymes, basically. So, the information then is in the mechanics, basically.
Okay, fine. We don't ask further, but I think the key point though here is that not only are you, the first African molecular biology company, but at this time of COVID, you were able to very quickly deploy a test kit using locally manufactured reagents. And my understanding of test kits is that the biggest gap in supply is the reagents, which have to be imported from elsewhere in the world. And this is a multi-million-dollar business. So, this is amazing, and congratulations. And we look forward to seeing those kits, and hopefully we'll see them all over Africa. And with that, I now go to our third panelist, who is here in Ethiopia, so a little closer to home for me. And this is Janet Lemma, who is the founder and managing director of Gaber Garment. Gaber Garment was established in 2016 and currently employs 75 people, of which the majority are women. So Janet has been very active and is quite well known here in Ethiopia with the work she's doing on quickly pivoting her business to manufacturing face masks, and has been featured recently on BBC. So I think we're going to start with a video, and then we'll hear from Janet.
My name is Janet Lemma. I am the founder and managing director of a local garment manufacturing company called Gaber. We are located in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Today, welcome you to come into our workshop and see what we've been doing since we've had our first confirmed case of COVID-19. We've swiftly repurposed our manufacturing to drop any other product line and focus on face mask as well as PPE. Ethiopia is only a developing country with a population size of 100 million. As you can imagine, it's very not practical to apply a total lockdown and expect the entire population to stay home. It's instead recommended for Ethiopians to wear face masks, to apply social distance, and get as much knowledge as possible about COVID-19. So here at Gaber, we hire on average about 75 permanent employees, majority of which are women and some in managerial position. We like to believe that we are directly contributing towards the fight against this epidemic that we're facing.
It's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be part of this amazing panel discussion. It's very timely as we are facing a post-COVID, very challenging time, especially as an SME in Africa. But with challenge, as it's been said, it is also an opportunity to innovate. And for those of you that are actually here in Ethiopia, I'm sure you've seen the creativity around as simple as hand washing and how the community has come up with ways and to make hand washing available with the very little resource that we have. I've even seen a young entrepreneur promote a hand wash sink that's attached with a pedal so that it's touch-free. So it made me really think, where has this innovation been? We have it in us. And to come back to Gaber, As a garment manufacturing company that has been in operation for about 3 years, we found ourselves well positioned to be able to contribute towards the fight against this epidemic. So we've been very busy since we've had our first case confirmed back in March. We have produced to date about 80,000 face masks that are made of fabric for commercial sales. In addition, as part of our campaign to donate masks and what we call Mask for All, we have donated 3,000 face masks for different nonprofit organizations that are focused on the elderly. We are also making PPEs that is definitely contributing to healthcare workers. And we actually learned that there is a acute shortage of PPE in Ethiopia. So we were happy to be able to manufacture that. To date, we've produced about 1,000 PPE, and we are getting ready to launch our first round of donation of about 60 PPE to the COVID-19 treatment centers here in Ethiopia. So COVID-19 is definitely here to stay. So what is our vision? As a company, I think we really, really believe that locally we have the talent, the resources to be able to fulfill the gap in providing face masks as well as PPE to our community and to our healthcare workers. As I've seen in public bids, we are seeing that we are still, as a country, very heavily focusing or depending on imports from China and other countries. And I saw that one bid from the government was sourcing about 10 million different face masks, including reusable. And here I'm thinking, you know, all these SMEs here, we're here, and we're capable of producing. So I think that our vision for the next 4 months is to be able to produce about 500,000 face masks, as well as about 5,000 PPEs. That's our goal. And what I think would actually be very constructive is myself representing Gaber and other 10 companies have actually come together as a consortium so we can better tackle the large bid quotations that are out there, and we can also produce in a larger amount. And I think that this consortium is going to be game changing for us. And I think I've also learned being part of this consortium that this is really not the time to compete. It's the time to survive so we can all scale and come out of this challenging time winning.
Thank you, Jeanette. You've really touched on something that I'm absolutely passionate about, which is the local manufacturing of basic face masks. And we also know that beyond the cloth masks, we have the medical or surgical masks, and then from there the N95s. And I think, you know, the numbers you're talking about are, I mean, you know, much higher than the 10 million bid that you saw. I mean, I think I've seen a recent estimate of the total need for Ethiopia from the Ministry of Health of something in the order of 200 million plus face masks. And Ethiopia's strategy has been pretty much also to go towards the surgical masks rather than the N95. And so the question is, you know, and we'll talk more about this with you, but really, how can companies like yours get certified to produce even the surgical masks, which is again simply a matter of having the right material to be able to produce it. I think the technology is not that difficult, and you have already the capacity to produce. So how do you scale that up? How do you get there? And I think this is something we'll come back to. But before that, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing our fourth startup panelist, who has been doing very, very many things and who is a very busy man. And I am even amazed that he's still awake, given all that is going on in his corner of the world. So Mike Ndala is a principal at Blendcorp and co-founder and CEO of Moxit Inc., which is a software tech company in the US that provides a complete tech stack for care providers. He's got over 20 years of experience in the tech space and has consulted in the private and public sectors, including the White House, the US Department of Education, among others. But more importantly, or as importantly, recently, Mike and some many others have kicked in a massive effort, and he's one of the organizers of something called the Ethiopia COVID-19 Response Team, which is a global volunteer team of 1,700 plus software engineers, doctors, manufacturers, and others who are helping Ethiopia's Ministry of Health, as well as expanding now to other African countries in their response to COVID-19 using a multiple array of digital solutions and different tracks of efforts that he will share with us. So I think, again, we do not have a video for Mike, so we'll go straight to hearing from Mike.
Thank you, Dr. Eleni. We appreciate the opportunity to tell our story, and it's personally, it's a distinct honor to be here. So as any good story, it has a beginning. This is a few days after Ethiopia has a confirmed case, sent a single tweet asking for a bunch of engineers to come together and see if we can hack something together. That's how the Ethiopia COVID-19 response team was founded. This was 10 weeks ago, and we're now a globally distributed team of over 1,700 volunteers organizing at the intersection of technology and public awareness, logistics to help and prevent COVID-19. Our team has been involved over these last 10 weeks from designing and executing awareness campaigns that reached more than 10 million people and build open source digital tools that are very purpose-built for COVID-19 response that empower civic organizations across Africa. And we're very happy that our open source solution was highlighted at the GitHub conference a couple of weeks ago. We also make a set of solutions available from health counseling to healthcare workers in Ethiopia by providing them a call center, which is the first of its kind, and sourcing and manufacturing personal protective gears by partnering like Gabber in country. And it's important to manufacture these products in country and in order to build the capacity. And we believe our role is by connecting resources with needs. Our team has also been working on making significant and meaningful impact in all of the COVID centers in Ethiopia, bring resources to these healthcare workers, which we call heroes, in order to help them by providing them from symptom tracking digital tools to scrubs, which it seems like they never have, and be able to support them in many other areas that they need support on. One of the things I want to highlight here is there is a medical doctor in Ethiopia, and this is what makes this a human journey as much as powerful as anything. This medical doctor in Ethiopia, she's 29 years old. The burden of the country rests squarely on her shoulder. And the tenacity that she shows day in and day out in responding to COVID-19, it's purely awe-inspiring. So the fact that we stayed up, until the wee hours of the morning, trying to help her makes it all that significant for us. Because if she's successful, everybody will be successful. The country would be successful. The continent would be successful. I think we should take pride in knowing that these solutions are very Africans, built by Africans. And it's very much this conversation is going to lead, hopefully, to bigger dialogues in every country in Africa that we can do, not only through COVID, but in the post-COVID world, that we can do these type of solutions ourselves. And I appreciate the opportunity again to tell our story, and we'll be happy to come back and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. In the interest of time, I won't ask you to elaborate on some of the digital tools, but hopefully we can come back to that because we're quite curious about what those solutions are that your very massive team has developed. But that said, I am now really excited that we have the and also someone who is really shaking this continent, and that is the Regional Bureau Director of the Regional Bureau for Africa for UNDP, Ms. Ahuna Eziakwanwa. And we are going to ask Ahuna today to really reflect a little bit from UNDP's perspective, watching all this and seeing this surge of innovation, and really, how to harness it, how to address it, and how to work with governments to really tap into this energy. The fact that in Africa, a young scientist can develop an enzyme and a molecular biology solution that could really not just be impactful in Africa but across the world. And similarly, the work of the others that we've heard, and of course the local manufacturing, the SMEs being able to pivot. And I think that's also the theme here that I've gotten from each of these interventions, Ahuna, is that each of these entrepreneurs were engaged in their core business and jumped at the COVID moment to pivot and to flexibly get involved in one or the other or many aspects of a response to COVID. And that's, as we've said many times, the beauty of being small, the beauty of being an entrepreneur. And so that is an asset that I think UNDP is clearly aware of, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But the question is, how do we use that? So over to you. And thank you so much for partnering with us in hosting this webinar.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. I have a bit of an echo here, but okay, it's gone away. Great. Thank you so much. And Eleni, I want to start by thanking you for your passion and for championing this once in a blue moon talent that changes the world. This is the first thing you said to me when I first met you, and it struck a chord in me, that we have an African woman that is fully accomplished and could live anywhere in the world, live out whatever dreams she wants. And her one passion and dedication is to find this once in a blue moon talent, creativity on the African continent. Not only changes Africa, but also and I really salute you for that, Lenny. This is what I know you burn your energy every day to do. And I don't think we made a mistake when we selected you as one of our African influencers for development. I'm so proud that you're in that team. Dear young people, what a pleasure it is to listen to you. This is, I mean, for someone who works in the development field, this is a dream come true. You know, UNDP is an organization that works on development solutions, but over 50 years of development practice has taught us one thing, that the world we live in today, the kind of development challenges that we face every day, defy everything we knew about development practice, you know, and the traditional way of doing development. And so we need to seek new ways. And you are here putting those new ways on the table. And this is why, as an organization, we're investing in this kind of evolution. The administrator of UNDP 2 years ago had this initiative to establish accelerator labs in the different countries where we work. UNDP is in about 170 countries operational. In Africa, we're present everywhere on the continent. And the idea of the accelerator labs is precisely to put in place, to give you this UNDP platform and asset to explore solutions, to experiment on solutions, and to deliver them for development. And in each of these countries where we have the accelerator labs, we're starting to connect with this ecosystem. And it's so fascinating to see what we're discovering. And one of the principles here is indeed what you said, Mike, that solutions can come from the continent. I want to tell you something as an African myself now, who has seen this continent go through many layers of tragedies. You know, this is a country that's seen a lot of devastation. But I think the deepest devastation that we have seen on the continent of Africa, on African people so far, is the tragedy of that loss of confidence. You know, when a continent is subjected to so much of the mindset of aid, people start to doubt themselves. So there's a lot of self-doubt, not only of the people, but also of the leadership. And what you're demonstrating here today is a restoration of that confidence. There is no nation in the world that develops without this inner confidence, this belief in their own ability to transform their situations. And this is exactly what you're doing. You know, it's really saying we have the capability. And, you know, it is so exciting, Eleni, to see this from what we heard from Daniel. And your question is, how do we leverage this? How do we scale this? First, you've started by having this kind of partnership with Blue Moon, where we provide a platform for them to tell their stories. Because it starts with the visibility and the credibility, given this kind of initiatives credibility, because they're coming from unexpected quarters. These are the places where we expect to get solutions. So we as development agencies have to create platforms that give these voices an ear globally. And that's the first thing that we're doing. And that's why we're partnering with you on this. We need to get the stories out, get people to hear. Secondly, we need to build the connections between them. And we know that the networking, it's an ecosystem. One, we cannot allow people to just work in their own lanes and suffer all the challenges. We need to build the connection so that they can leverage each other and build on their own strengths. And thirdly is we need to provide financing. And you know, Temi, when I first met you, I was struck by something you said, very powerful as a development practitioner listening to you say, we're not here asking for aid to build NGOs. We're here asking for equity to build businesses that create jobs. That is transformational. And I say to you here, you've got UNDP as a partner in helping create these opportunities for you to connect to that equity that then allows scale to happen. Because we need then to scale. We need to scale these initiatives. And thirdly, I think this idea that we have to get governments, the leadership, to see, not only to see the potential in these initiatives, but to understand what they need to do, the contribution of the public sector to facilitating the growth of these businesses. And UNDP works with governments. We accompany governments on their development journey. We work on a range of sectors, from governance, which is where you find the domain where you find all the enabling factors, whether it's in terms of the regulatory environment that allows you to do what you have to do without too many obstacles. Young people on the continent who are trying to be entrepreneurs are having to scale very high fences. This is what we find. From just having access to assets like land, if you're young and female, it's even worse for you because you're not allowed to own certain assets. You're not. So all of these restrictions, all these fences have to come down. And I think what COVID-19 is facilitating for us is the urgency and the imperative of governments to see the to see a purpose in this, in opening up the ways for these to flourish, for these initiatives to flourish. And Eleni, I think this is something we're committed to as an agency that works on the ground with governments and other actors to make sure that that enabling environment is created.
Excellent, excellent. You know, I just so this is music to our ears, Ahona, and you've really put it squarely as a partnership. And I think, you know, I was also thinking as each of the speakers was giving their intervention that nobody talked about getting, you know, money from UNDP as a sort of a handout, or nobody was here sort of putting out their what do you call it, their hat, saying, you know, I need you to help me do this and that. They were all talking about how they kicked into action and how they are out there and how they have dreams and aspirations. And this is, I think, exactly to what you said. Getting out of silos. There is nothing as lonely as being an entrepreneur. And I think Mike's, you know, massive team is testament to what one startup or a team of startups can do with thousands of other like-minded innovators and entrepreneurs, but also just this idea of creating these platforms for people to interact. You talked to Ahona. And then, of course, the key, which I think everyone on this panel would agree, is sort of the air or the water to this ecosystem, which is financing. It is very, very tough for you know, a young person to get access to financing, especially for something innovative. And then finally, I think you really put it very well when you said, you know, getting the whole environment aligned around this, that this is important, and that COVID has enabled us to jumpstart really taking all of this very seriously. And I think, and I'm going to be very blunt here, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think governments are seeing their young entrepreneurs as seriously as they ought. And as you've said, hopefully these kinds of forums will raise the awareness and make this really something that is on the radar of policymakers, that we can harness this kind of talent, this kind of energy, and really turn things around. And so that's the COVID moment. And I don't know, do you want to ask any specific questions about any of the interventions you've heard, or we can also do the reverse. We have a few minutes before we take a quick break, and then start our questions from the audience. But would love to maybe hear if you have some thoughts further with the specific entrepreneurs on the panel.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eleni. I think what I really want to hear from all of you, and your stories are unique and different in their own way, but there is one underlying commonality, which is that you want to transform situations for everybody. You know, when I hear Jeanette talk about the focus on the elderly, you know, these are populations that can be forgotten and left behind. In Sierra Leone, we're working with an entrepreneur, a young man called Franklin, who is doing something for the physically challenged. You know, we talk about hand washing. We don't think about the physically challenged, for whom washing hands might be a different story altogether. So you have an innovator that's working on something like that. In the Sustainable Development Goals, we talk about leaving no one behind, and your innovations are very much thoughtful about how you bring solutions to the entire community where they are and what their circumstances are. And so it's a dream for a development agency like UNDP to have partners like you. And I want to ask you, if you had one thing that you would like to see change in the way that the society is organized and in the way leadership is constructed, what would it be in order to really open up the gates for acceleration of some of the initiatives and innovations that you have? I mean, just one thing that you found in the way that you say, if we take this off, the sky will be the limit.
Now that is the $64 million question when the head of UNDP Africa asks you, what can we help you get out of your way to help you shoot to the top? Let's have a quick response from each of you. Kick off maybe with Temi, since you were first in the order before.
Yes, thank you, Eleni, and what a powerful question. I think the way that I would answer that is, how are we supporting innovations to scale? What are the choices we're making, and how do we make those choices? You know, when you're an entrepreneur and you're in the global south and you have your heads down, you're building and building and building, it is really hard to, you know, create this sort of one-on-one relationships that actually matters when, scale, when big development agencies are making choices on, you know, who they're going to support to scale. For me, I think getting that, how we're choosing which innovation to support to scale, moving away from one-on-one relationships to focusing on who's actually getting the best results. So if you want to support an entrepreneur who's building technology for education, if you want to support entrepreneur who's building technology for, you know, who's building, you know, a textile industry that's responding to COVID, rather than focus on who do we have a relationship with, how do we sort of like cast the net wider, focus on who's actually having the most impact, who's actually almost ready for scale, particularly in the global south. I think that's the one thing that I would sort of change, that gatekeeping, making the gatekeeping more focused on results, rather than sort of like how do we build those one-on-one relationships.
Okay, I think Temi has said quite a lot packed into that, and Ahuna, I'm sure you are taking note, but really, how to tease out those scalable innovations, I would say. And I think next maybe we can go to Daniel, since you were also second in the order.
Thank you. I think I'm going to speak as a scientist. Maybe the message will be amplified, across the continent, because I'm speaking about Africa now here. I think in Africa, we've been doing research for the purpose of doing research. We haven't really been doing research that is relevant to Africa. I think if I had to speak to the presidents around the continent, I would advise that we refocus our attention to developmental aspects of Africa in a science community. You can look at the landscape of science in general. It's all based on European journals, European insights, or American or Chinese. We don't have the origin or the genesis of science that comes out of Africa, and we need to create that, because science is life. Without science, we will have no life. We have COVID-19, and we have science that needs to respond to that. Look what happened recently during the outbreak. All governments have to run to the former colonial powers to ask for help. Yet we have scientists that are highly talented across the continent that could have been given an opportunity to innovate and bring about innovations that are relevant to Africa, so that when we face diseases, not only COVID-19, but we had Ebola before, we had many others before, and all this require an African science community to collectively work together to respond to. But before then, we need to create a starting point. I think that's we need to stop, looking abroad in terms of knowledge, because we do have a lot in Africa that we can unpack and create value and create jobs and etc.
Excellent point, Daniel. I think that's a really, really important point and well put. The importance of really developing our own scientific and research community, or strengthening the community that is there. Jeanette, do you want to say a few words in response to Ahuna's question?
Sure.
Honestly, I wish if access to finance, access to working capital is definitely the biggest challenge for a young entrepreneur or a startup. And I wish we had more innovative way in if banks had, for example, they could take more chances on our young entrepreneurs and didn't always need collateral. Maybe if relationship banking was a thing in Ethiopia or even just within the continent, I think we would really be able to do amazing things in Africa. And having to provide collateral for a 20-something-year-old is practically, impossible. And the due diligence procedure that you have to go through to get a very little funding, it's very difficult. And I wish we had more innovative and different way of providing, funding and loans for young entrepreneurs. And I think speaking as an SME in Ethiopia that has struggled a whole lot, my background is accounting and finance, and having lived in the US and a completely different way, I was very challenged, especially at my back, especially having to deal with different government offices. I would say SMEs are definitely the missing middle. When there are different policies in place, there is usually no consideration for us, and yet I think we have the highest potential for creating jobs, and that's the only way that we can eradicate poverty. And sometimes I'm very baffled because I've seen many policies that literally did not consider SMEs, and they're focused either on the micro enterprises or they're focused on the larger scale FDIs. So that I think will be game changing for us.
Very good point. I mean, here you are manufacturing masks in a country, and this is not the continent, just the country of Ethiopia, that is looking from the public health service to likely import 200 million surgical masks. In fact, I think it's upwards of that, 250 to 300 million surgical masks. How we can get you and companies like you, SMEs, in this multi-million, maybe billion dollar opportunity is, and the jobs that you create and you retain instead of jobs abroad, is really the core question. And it's you've said it's unlocking finance, but it's really about policy. And I think Lahuna spoke at length about the importance of really focusing on that issue of, what are the policies around financing or around regulatory hurdles that can be unlocked. And so now we turn to Mike, and Mike can also give his perspective on this point.
Yeah, and thanks, Sahuna. That was a very thoughtful question. And I think, as anything, I think the theme is clear here that the entry point is always the challenging part, especially for such a small, SMEs and startups, and especially for those of us who are technically inclined, right? You can see us belaboring the point to tell our story, not all that effectively, because we're fairly technical folks. So it would be a very interesting thing to experiment if there is any predictable way of financing and supporting. The other thing I think that's less understood and maybe underappreciated is the footprint that organizations like UNDP has. Like you said, there's a relationship already in 170 countries. Maybe the only thing that needs to be done is just make the connections, right? Make the platform available so that these type of, because at the end of the day, if you take the Ethiopia COVID response team and some of the products that we've developed, really what we're looking for is a partner who can take us to these offices so that they would be able to break barriers for us, or open doors for us, right? Some of the products that we're building, we think are so impactful and so timely and so needed right now, like the contact tracing tools that we've built, that had, the Nigerian government or the Gabonians or the Ghanaians or the South Africans, if they find out about it, it will just compress the time that they have to respond to COVID, which helps their society. It's just a win-win across the board, right? So I think most of us, these type of questions oftentimes are directly correlated with finance, but that finance is not the only thing that you have. It's just the sheer amount of footprint and the down payment that you've been paying, the organization has been paying for decades after decades, these institutional knowledge. And I'll tell you this, like as a startup founder, part of the challenge was for the first few weeks, identifying the problem, right? That was actually identifying the exact choke point in the process was equally as difficult, if not more difficult, than building the solution for it, right? So it would be interesting if organizations like UNDP or the Africa CDC, these type of large organization within the development and health realm, be open, have some sort of systematic way to open up their platform so that things can be built on top of it, so that by using its network effect, it can be reached out to, because sometimes, like for Timmy's point, what Timmy is looking for is literally the connection to go to the next country, right? Because she could care less, in my opinion, about the funding that she would get from some organization. So there is a huge opportunity that Ahuna, that your organization, your team can tap into. Like, this is the heartbeat of the future. You just have to open the platform and think about it as like the Facebook of development, right? Where things can be built on top of you.
Wow, I like that. UNDP as the Facebook of development. Now that's an interesting thought, Ahuna. But I liked what Mike said, which is partnerships and opening the doors and having that two-way interaction. And I have a funny story, and I'm going to put Daniel on the spot. When I contacted him to see if he could join us on this webinar, one of the first things he said to me was, UNDP, that's development program? And so I thought, so here we are in that. And I had a moment where, all my life I've known all about these international organizations. As a person his age growing up, I knew exactly what UNDP was. And here's a person, doing these amazing things, and who UNDP is a very, far from his reality. And in a way that's good, because UNDP and other development partners are now taking maybe second stage in some sense to what people are doing in their day-to-day lives, but it's also a concern because we need each other. And I think Temi put it very well when she said what we do strengthens what governments and partners can do, and vice versa. So I think really that's, to Mike's point, a very excellent point. So Ahuna, I think if you want to react, we can take a minute to do that, and then we're going to take a 2-minute break where we will look at a couple of videos, one of which is the UNDP video in Sierra Leone. So maybe you could frame a little bit of what that is about, the work that was done with the entrepreneurs in Sierra Leone that we see.
Thank you. Thanks all for coming back. I think this is really, it demonstrates the importance of listening, and really, for me, our first task as a development agency is, I think, to listen, because just listening to you now has put a whole playbook in my mind as to how we conduct the business of development support to countries, and how we leverage this dynamism that is growing. I call you young industrialists. It's an emerging field here. And everything that you've said, I think it's within actually our reach in terms of working and building. You see, there's a bridge in my background. Yeah, we see UNDP more and more as that bridge. But Mike, thanks for that tagline. It's one that I haven't heard before, and one that I will submit to the administrator of UNDP, who is also very passionate about this field. But Janet, I think you hit the nail on the head about SMEs being really having the highest potential of job creation. Every African country today is preoccupied with how to create jobs for this huge young population, huge dynamic, as Eleni said at the beginning, much more educated and enlightened and more connected. You cannot let them lose and idle. That's every leader's preoccupation. How do we put jobs in the hands? And SMEs have that potential much more than any other sector. And yet it is the least serviced. And what COVID-19 is actually revealing to us is the structural deficiencies that we have in each country in terms of the relationship with SMEs. And this is what we are starting to invest in now. First, understanding how deep this scar is, and how to begin to bring healing to it. And that healing starts to happen in the minds of our leadership and in the structures of the systems, to understand really that we're missing a lot by not investing in this sector. And I think you all also mentioned something that is very difficult in the African cultural mindset, to understand that young people can do big things. That a 20-year-old could transform the world. This is something, because in our African culture, we see young people as people who are still dependent. We have to take care of them. So they're passive recipients of our goodwill, rather than active agents that can change the course of history. So really, we have a lot of work to do in just shifting the minds on these demographic divisions that exist, this sort of generational fractures. But just to say, Eleni, I think we hear you, and of course the financing gap is something we're working on. Eleni knows this. We've got something we're cooking with you on precisely how we do that investment on making financing less painful, more predictable, and sustaining. And I end with this. I think the thing about the homegrown solutions we're finding, and this data has already confirmed this, for development that can be sustained, that can be resilient, and that can be shared, you need to focus on solutions from within. We find over the 5 decades of development practice that imported solutions don't do that magic at all those 3 levels. They can sort of cover the wound on a temporary basis, but you really need the homegrown knowledge. And Daniel, I couldn't agree more with you about this, Africa science community. And it comes back to Africans believing in their ability to compete in this world of science. And it's starting to come. You find at the African Union and elsewhere already some indications that Africa can sign up with the rest of the world in finding a vaccine for this. So there is a sense that, okay, we're not just going to wait until a vaccine is found and then we start to debate whether Africa gets access to it or not. But we're going to sign up African science institutions to be part of the global force that is looking for the vaccine and believing that it could actually come from Africa. So that is starting to shift. And I think with all your help, with your insistence, and a lot of you have demonstrated a lot of resilience and tenacity, that's what this problem is going to need, is that you insist. You know how it is when you put something in somebody's face, it's in your face and it doesn't go away. That's the kind of spirit we need to bring to this.
That's right. Excellent. I love it. I love it. I love it. You've said so much, and I'm not even going to try to recap. Let's take a couple of minutes, just exactly 2 minutes, to watch some videos while we stretch our legs and come back for another 15 minutes of question and answer. We have lots of questions coming in. We have viewers, about 10% of our viewers are in the US, and I think also other parts of North America. We also have about 86% of viewers from around Africa, and we have others from other regions. So every region of the world is actually on this webinar. And that's exciting too, because the world is listening. So with that, I think we're going to see a video by UNDP's work or about UNDP's work in Sierra Leone with an entrepreneur. And we'll also have a quick look at the Aberrant campaign by Blue Moon. And then we will come back for a quick round of questions. So stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
My name is Franklin. I'm an innovator. In childhood, I've been heavily interested in science and technology, and I did my studies through engineering. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I decided to strengthen the hygiene culture of hand washing. So the existing hand washing station, a pedal system and hand-giving system. Disabled people are unable to use these systems accurately, so I decided to create a sensor-based hand washing station that washes your hands and dispense soap and also dry your hand. Product is very friendly for everyone to use. People all around my community are interested in the product and they're using it. My hope is to see my products and my devices scattered all around the world at large, people to benefit from these devices and make the world a better place. In order for me to scale up my design, I will need more technical expertise, recruitment of more staffs, and also get the right materials so that my design could reach the market standards.
Spend the next few minutes before we wrap up this what's been really an inspiring and amazing webinar, and I hope you feel the same way, but I've really enjoyed it so far. We have a few questions and so we have about 10 minutes, so let's just take just a few. There's a question from Fergus in Canada, and he's asking what are the opportunities to establish and implement digital health initiatives on the continent? I think, Temi, you can maybe address this. We have a question from Theodore in the Netherlands. How can we, development organizations, help entrepreneurs produce quality, scalable solutions that will help other young entrepreneurs to go and operate digital so that they can keep their business running? Ahuna, maybe you'd like to, as a development agency, address that question. And our third and last question we'll ask is to Mike from Abdi Aberra, I believe in Ethiopia, saying, wow, this is inspiring. Can you kindly please share a bit more on the open source tools that you mentioned? So Temi, if you could address sort of that question around digital health.
Right, thank you, Eleni. I think that's an interesting question. The way I would answer it is, there are lots of, I would say, entrenched problems in the health system across Africa. And I think the key is to figure out which of those problems you'd like to solve. and to build your expertise in figuring out that problem. I think it's really critical that as we are solving problems, we solve it in a scalable way, in a way that is cost effective and profitable. Because I think for me, like Ahuna mentioned, we're young industrialists, and profit is critical to building industry and to scaling and to being entrenched and resilient. And for me, I think make sure that as you're building, I think the market is open. I think there are lots of entrenched problems in the health sector across Africa. I think you just have to figure out which problem makes your heart sing, and which problem you really want to focus on solving, and then ensuring that there's profitability built into your model, and that you can scale it. For us at LifeBank, that's been the most and the critical thing. And I think the third thing is making sure that your innovation is not basically building versions of what's available in the West, but actually building things that's localized. I think that's really critical. LifeBank, the way we've structured our model is really resilient. It is really localized, solving this problem that's been entrenched for ages, that a lot of different model has been used to solve it and could not. And we're solving it by focusing on profit, by making sure that we're cost effective, that making sure that we've localized the solution and we're providing jobs. LifeBank, for every unit of medical supplies we deliver, that's one job. That's one person who gets a livelihood. That's just somebody who can ride a bike, or somebody who can paddle a boat, and then they become medical dispatches, and they really become we elevate their life, we change their lives with the jobs we're providing in rural areas and urban centers across Africa. So I think that's what is really critical. That is what's needed, and I think the market is open. So please innovate away.
There you go. Great. Mike, do you want to give us a sense of the open source tools that you referred to?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question. So the product that we've built is, we called it an Africa COVID-19 response toolkit. It compromises about 10 different products. So from real-time operational dashboards, these are dashboards that are specifically designed for somebody who would sit in with Ministry of Health or any civic organization that's responding on the ground. They would be able to synthesize the incoming data and show it in a very action-oriented dashboard. We've built a set of bots that are used actually to push out and collect data from the public, right? These are very easy to use messenger, they're built on top of Telegram and WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. These are a series of bots that we've built. There is a very dynamic product that we've built with the API to be able to use existing systems. So one of the things that was important early on is you cannot replace existing systems. You have to work within the ecosystem that already exists. So there is no rip and replace. It's incremental change that we believe that needs to be the case from the beginning. So the product that we've built already integrates with some of the best and widely used AMR systems, which is the medical system in all of Africa, called DHIS2 and ComCare. They have a very easy integration points to be able to just snip it together. In addition to that, we have other tools like logistical tool for healthcare workers, or one of the things I mentioned earlier was the counseling tool. So how do you allow healthcare workers to be able to quickly track their symptoms, what they're feeling, give the data back to administrators, but also when they need emotional support, how do they access counselors on the other side of the line? So all of these things had to come together. We did another product for isolated patients. These are patients who are in isolated centers. How do you provide content to them? So one of the things which I think is the clever thing that our team came up with is these patients in isolation, in quarantine centers and so on and so forth. One of the things that it really becomes difficult is their mental state starts to deteriorate very quickly. So in order to support that, our team figured out a way to make religious songs, and depending on their relationship, their identification. So we made a catalog of these, religious type of sermons and that sort of stuff so that they can stay abreast, right? So making sure that both the mind and the body is actually in sync. And these are some of the very creative things that it came out of nowhere, right? And it, to Ahuna's point earlier, that this is a solution for Africans designed by Africans' children, which I think it makes my heart sing more than anything. So I think the future is bright. I think the fact that COVID happens is blessing in disguise in some ways, because it's a realignment of some of these value systems. Jeanette made like probably one of the most courageous thing by moving from the US to Ethiopia. I hope most of us do that, right? And be contributing part of the society. So yeah, it's been a very inspiring journey. Hard, but inspiring journey.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you,
And
Mike.
one more thing to mention. Yeah, one more thing. The product that we've built are already open source and anybody can access them on GitHub. So just want to mention that.
Where would we find them?
They're on GitHub, open source on GitHub. Yeah.
You've said a lot, and I actually had forgotten to mention in introducing you that you know, all of this work that you're talking about, and there's so much of it, could have its own webinar, and maybe it's having that. But you've been featured at recently at the Harvard Business School Africa Forum event, as well as MIT. So I think that this idea of all this, you know, the many products developed and integrated under your Africa COVID response toolkit is very, very very useful and inspiring. So I think we'll give the last word on the question about how can development agencies work on helping entrepreneurs really work on these COVID solutions, but also linking it. We've already said a lot around that, but maybe Ahuna can summarize it in a way that Theodore in Netherlands might want to could understand. Ahuna, do we have you?
Sorry, Eleni, I waited a little bit, a little while ago. So maybe you can repeat the question, maybe about 3 minutes ago. So I'm just reconnecting. I missed the last 3 minutes.
Good to know that we are not the only ones having connection problems, that even in New York. But anyway, the question to you, Ahuna, from Theodore in the Netherlands was, how can we development organizations work better with entrepreneurs as they craft solutions to COVID, and as they also enable other entrepreneurs to rise up? And so I think we've been talking generally around that. So this might be a nice way for you to wrap up our event by just kind of summarizing your thoughts on this.
Right. Yeah, I think maybe I'll just reiterate some of the things said earlier. The first one is, for an agency like UNDP, we really do have the infrastructure to connect with really a lot of what Mike was saying, because we're on the ground, we're close to government, work on multi-dimensional development. So UNDP is not a sector organization. We don't just do health or education or agriculture. We look at the full chain. The whole chain of development, and our DNA is really to help integrate all the different components that need to be together to be able to make that development impact happen. So that character of the organization itself then gives us really that foundation to be able to bring the different talents on one platform. We have what we call Youth Connect, which is a platform developed with the Rwandan government some years ago, and it's now present in 20 African countries. And it serves that purpose of connecting the dots, first of all, convening this powerful ecosystem, but also connecting that to Africans everywhere in the world, but also beyond Africans. Last 2 years ago, when we had the Youth Connect session in annual meeting in Rwanda, we had 90 countries who show up. So beyond Africa. So there is that connection between Africa, but also the connection with the globe that an agency like ours can do. And that creates the opportunity to just listen and see and give visibility to this work, because knowing and seeing is believing. Sometimes when you just, as an agency, just tell the story yourself, it doesn't hit home until you actually have the people present and hear their own voices. Then people start to see that possibility. The second one, I think, is what we've mentioned about financing access. UNDP is developed what we call a finance sector hub. And the central mission of that hub is really to find innovative financing opportunities for startups such as this one, for small medium enterprises, looking at all manner of instruments out there that could be brought to bear to create this opportunity and to bring some of these initiatives to scale. So we're looking very much in this space of creating a youth enterprise trust. And again, it's not about funding, it's about financing and looking at the various options there. The digital space is very, very promising for Africa, as we've seen even in the area of finance, digital finance. We see a lot of transformative opportunities there that we're starting to look at. So really, I think all we see in this crisis, we see a lot of devastation, but also we see a lot of opportunity. And the window, that opportunity window, is very, very narrow. We don't want people, once this is over, to go back to normal, because normal is exactly what was wrong, because normal led us to a lot of inequality, where, it was food present, but only for a few. Normal is what led us to unsustainability, where we invest in things that are not durable. Normal also led us to lack of resilience, where development programs were not shock-proof. So you get the first wave of disasters and everything gets wiped out and you start from scratch. So the new normal that everyone is talking about, it really is about investing in ways that create that equality, that reduce inequality, that creates more resilience, and that is much more sustainable. And this is what we want to be looking at when we work with startups and SMEs, because we think the answer in the new way of working is going to come from this sector. We really believe so, because there's a lot of conscientious approach, a lot of conscientious way of working in this approach, a lot of compassionate way. Yet it's about profit making, because you need profit to succeed and to grow. But what really the element that is so precious, and it's very characteristic of this generation of industrialists, is this element of doing development with compassion, in a way that is inclusive and in a way that is sustainable. When you listen to all the stories that we heard today, you find these three fundamentals as part of the features of what they're doing. So I think that we have exciting opportunities to really make Africa the future of development, where the future of development will be curated and harnessed and contributed to the world. And I want all of you to think beyond Africa, really. It's time to think that even though Africa is shaped like a question mark, it does have the answer. It could be the answer that the world needs. The pandemic has hit everywhere in the world. It's not just an Africa problem. Everywhere in the world is looking for solutions. Africa can find its own solutions, but it also can contribute to the global solutions, because without the global solidarity, nowhere is safe. There is no place that can be an island today. So kudos to all of you. And I think, Eleni, what you've done today is really confirmed that we're talking to global citizens here, not just African nationals, but global citizens. And it's been such a great pleasure to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Ahuna. Honestly, very inspiring comments and reflections, and absolutely no way that I could summarize or try to repeat any of that. But really, just some amazing points. And I think that as we wrap up, because we are out of time, I want to really just say this has been for me quite an inspiring session to hear the motivation and the passion of our four startups, but also the passion and the motivation of our wise UNDP Africa leader, who is really reflecting on the young industrialists, and also the role of UNDP, as Mike put it, maybe the future Facebook of development thinking, putting together, all sides and bringing us together to come up with those solutions. Another Mikeism that I liked a lot was local solutions designed for Africa by Africa's children. I think you were on you were not connected when he said that, so I want to repeat that for Ahuna. That think about local solutions for resilience, for sustainability, designed by Africa's children, by Africa's youth. We talked a lot about believing in ourselves, believing in our own scientific and knowledge base, trusting our own community and building our own community, and being bold enough to face the big multinationals. It takes a lot of guts for a young African entrepreneur to literally say, I am developing a solution for the world, and I know I'm facing the giants, and I'm still in it. It's also inspiring to hear Temi reaching across Nigeria, already a huge market, but already looking at Kenya and Ethiopia and beyond with the work that she's doing. And Jeanette, who put it very fairly and squarely that, I'm doing this because I have a mission and a purpose, and I really want to make the world a better place, and I want to do that as a local young entrepreneur, and I don't want to be ignored, and I think we've heard you. So a lot has been said, and another thing that I heard from Ahuna that I also want to repeat earlier was, the demographic divide. Do we take our young people seriously, and how to turn that demographic divide into a demographic dividend, an asset, all this energy and passion and talent and innovative, commitment and initiative. So I think, we've said a lot, we've learned a lot. I want to thank each and every one of you, Temi, Daniel, Jeanette, and Mike, and of course, my sister Ahuna. Thank you for this wonderful session. To the viewers who are with us all over the world, thank you for being on this webinar. We're also being streamed live on YouTube, and the YouTube will live on because nothing on the internet ever dies. So keep, amplifying the messages that came out in this webinar today. I think we have said things that really will hopefully mark a new direction for UNDP and other development partners. I think there's a momentum, a groundswell building around this, and I think it's exciting that UNDP is so committed to this. So let's amplify this message. Let's keep this going. Each of you on your various networks can continue to build on this idea, because that is the essence of being a connected humanity, is that our ideas live on and we continue and we build and we grow together. So thank you, all of you. Thank you in particular, UNDP Africa, for your partnership and for believing in this, and all of you entrepreneurs on this call and also on this webinar and also on this on the platform all over Africa and all over the world. Keep doing what you're doing. The world needs you. Thank you so much.